Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. I'm absolutely thrilled. Vanessa Mae is with us today. The only complaint I have is that I can't promise you, nor in fact is not happening, a performance, but you have to pay a bit more than £5 to do that. But we actually will be able to hear something much better, in my view, deeper. and the idea of this forum is to be as relaxed as possible. Some of you, I recognize faces, have been here before. It's a forum where I encourage excellent people who have achieved exceptional things in their fields to come and talk. It might relate to China, it might not, it doesn't really matter. I think over time, the idea is that Chinese or China will impinge upon everything we do. And I think Vanessa is a quarter Chinese or a half Chinese. I'll let her tell you about it. So there is some sort of connection. And the idea is excellence, erudition, intelligence, but also amusement and enjoyable. I don't want you to come for an hour to listen to some boring, droning lecture. I have been to so many of them, I would sooner stick a hot poker up my rear than to sit through another boring lecture. So you are going to be part of it, because the other idea about this forum is to open it up to as many members of the public as possible, so that you, for £5, will be able to come and interact with exceptional people like Vanessa. I don't want to encroach on her time. The format is very simple. She says whatever she likes to say. I will exercise my prerogative by asking her a couple of questions. Then I immediately open the floor for you to go and ask, and I just ask you to wait for the microphone to identify yourself and how much you got in the bank, and then ask the question. All I ask is that you ask an intelligent question. If it is stupid, I will slap you down and you will be passed on, okay? Because this is an intelligent forum, okay? All right, will you first of all join me warmly in welcoming Vanessa Mae? Tell us why you have chosen the title Musical Chairs.
Musical chairs. So, when I was a little kid, about your age, practicing and preparing for a life of music, I was always told to just bring my own identity, to the lesson, because at the end of the day, my professors always told me that you can teach a chair to play the violin, and so it's nothing special just to be able to play. You really have to inject your own. And starting in classical music, sort of chants you have to sort of ad-lib is kind of the cadenza. And that's how I started, first of all, in straight classical music. But then when I got to about the age of 14, 15, I started bastardizing classical music and mixing it up with a range of styles. And I think it was really thanks to my classical professors that I had the balls as a young kid, as a teenager.
I hope you didn't have balls.
Well, I'm half Thai, so I don't know sometimes. Lady boy and all that. But, yeah, so that's why I wanted to call it musical chairs. And plus, there's a lot of luck in life and in music. And I have to say that with my tiger mother, with the upbringing I had their support, my parents, to really nurture what potential I did have. And to me, it was just musical chairs, because life is about luck. You're born to parents who can support you. You're born to parents who can't support you. Everybody here is born with talent, and if it's allowed to be nurtured, then that makes all the difference. I think sometimes in life. So that's kind of why I called it musical chairs. Was your mother a tiger mother? I think by most Singaporean standards, because I was born in Singapore, so I'm half Singaporean Chinese and half
Is she
Thai.
ethnically Chinese or Thai or Singapore?
She is ethnically Chinese,
Yeah.
from...
Born in Singapore?
Yeah, born in Singapore.
So how is she Thai?
She's not Thai.
Oh, right, sorry. Sorry.
It's my natural father, my biological father.
The biological father is
Who
Thai,
is
so
Thai.
you are half Chinese,
Yeah,
a sort of Singaporean Chinese.
yeah.
And my original question was though she was the tiger mother.
But not by Singaporean standards, because, you know, Singapore, people are very competitive. It's
Where did
about-
you grow up? Which country?
In this country. I was
So-
born in Singapore, and I moved here when I was 3 because my mother married my second father, who adopted me. So
Ah,
my
right.
surname's actually Nicholson,
Right.
because my adoptive father
So
adopted
welcome, Vanessa Nicholson.
Nicholson.
So your mother, who was ethnically Chinese, Singaporean by citizenship, married a second time when you were 3, and
Well, actually, the
came over-
first father, they weren't married, so I was
Oh,
a
right,
bastard
okay.
child until my second father adopted me.
Yeah, you like that word. You've used it the second time now. All right. But then when you came here, was your mother the moving force? I mean, sometimes you hear mother wanting the child to learn an instrument, and sometimes you have mothers who only want you to be a genius. Did she think that I mean, your mother was a violinist herself, correct?
Pianist.
A pianist,
I mean,
sorry.
she sort
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
played the violin
Yeah.
a little bit,
But
more
she
pianist.
obviously saw you had some talent in playing the violin. Is that correct?
Well, actually, at the beginning, both my parents, my mother and my adoptive father, they were both practicing lawyers. So until I was about 7 or 8, I was left, sorry, about 6 or 7, I was left, you know, to the attention of my nanny, who basically sort of oversaw my music lessons. And
Was a nanny a trained musician?
No, she wasn't, but just at school, academic school, you know, there was the option to take music, and I took piano and violin. And I remember once I came home and I said, Mommy, Daddy, apparently I've made really good progress. I'm going to get a detention in music, and I meant distinction. But once Nanny cleared that up, basically, my parents started to pay some attention to me in the musical sense.
Your father was not a musician. Your adopted father was
He
not a
plays the viola.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so at home, did Nicholson and your mother play
Chamber music.
Chamber music
Yes,
together?
Yeah. They met through chamber music, so there was always chamber music, and people traipsing in and out. A lot of musician friends, a lot of music, not limited to just listening to classical, but.
So you were consciously musical when you went to school, and although they were practicing lawyer, you came home, and your nanny obviously encouraged you to play an instrument, and you took up the violin.
Yeah, I think the thing
And the
about
piano.
children, I think you just gravitate towards subjects where you get more attention or you get better grades, and I think music was something that I took to, and it took to me, and I really loved my violin professor, and I think that really makes all the difference. If you love your professors, then you're going to love that subject. So I was always
Okay, let me
really
just
lucky.
push you forward quickly so that you can finish your life story so that we can open the floor. So at about 7, your parents suddenly came home, and they suddenly realized that you had some talent, obviously. You were playing the piano and the violin and so forth. At what age did you take up the violin in earnest?
I decided to make it my vocation when I was 8 years old. So they basically had a conversation with me one day, and they asked me, you know, would you like to take it more seriously? And they presented the option of going to Siberia to a great professor there, apparently, or Beijing. And so, you know, I'd grown up in the West
But where
London.
did you go?
I went to Beijing.
You went to Beijing. So at 8, they obviously thought that you were especially talented, and if you were good enough to go to Beijing. So when did you go to Beijing? What age?
When I was 8 years old.
My God. So
So-
they just sent you off to Beijing?
Yeah, no, but to be fair, my mother took me for the first 3 months. I didn't speak any Chinese. I had some, you know, Chinese lessons, but I didn't really speak any Chinese.
Did you like it? Do you remember liking
loved
it?
it,
You loved
and-
it. Where did you stay?
In my professor's apartment, if you could call it that.
Really? Well, I'm sure.
I mean, sorry.
I don't know what you mean, but was he married?
He was, but he used to disappear
He
after
disappeared?
lunch every time.
Why?
And I
Were
was
the police
rather-
after him?
Well, I think he had another, you know.
He had a lover of some sort.
Quite
Yeah,
sort of
all right. So you lived, how long did you stay in Beijing?
About 6 months.
About 6 months.
But literally, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, has never, ever sort of got upset with me, except for the day that I was supposed to return to the UK, because I just loved it there. And I just loved the idea, you know, to have...
What year was this? I don't want to
I was
guess your
8 or
age,
9.
but...
Well, I'm 36 now. So, yeah.
36, so minus 8, that's 28.
Yeah.
We're now
My maths
2015, 28, help me. That's
I need my
28, that's
abacus.
1996 or 7, yes? 1997.
Thank you.
Who is that? Who said that? You smart so-and-so. 1987, that's why I told you. So 87, China was opening up, nonetheless.
Yes, it was
but yeah.
before Tiananmen Square.
Right. So you loved it, but you had to come home. So you came home.
Yeah, but I loved it because I just loved having, you know, I felt so lazy there because all these kids, I was obviously quite, how do you say, privileged in many ways, but my kind of classmates, could you call them,
Yeah.
they didn't have air conditioning, they had to practice in the sweltering heat in a bucket of water, they practiced like 8 hours a day when I only practiced
What did
about
you
4 hours.
play at 8 years old?
I don't know, whatever was given to me, Paganini Caprice here and there, I don't know, Bruch, violin concerto.
How can you
just
play
stuff.
Bruch violin concerto at the age of 8?
Well, you scrape away, and I still scrape away to this day, so not much
Well, you
change.
obviously have some extra talent. So anyway, we established your mother was not Tiger Mother as such, and it all came naturally to you.
At the beginning, not really,
I
because...
mean, when I first met your mother, the first word that came into my mind was tiger, because I just thought that, you know, she was a control freak, and I thought that she had been that since you were young, but I'm amazed myself to learn that in fact she wasn't. So you came back.
It wasn't until a bit later that it became a sort of
So you came back at 8
career as
o'clock.
such.
Sorry, 8 o'clock, 8 years old. And so what did you do when you came back to England?
Well, I went to the Royal College of Music,
Yeah.
well, basically I had a very understanding headmistress from my academic school who basically gave me that time off. So I went at 8 to China, came back for a stint, and went back at 9 to China. And when I returned, she allowed me just to go to school for half a day.
Okay, and so
and
how long did you stay in the
at
second
school,
time? Yeah,
About 3 months.
about 3 months, okay.
So all in all, only about 6 months, actually.
Yeah,
I
so
wish I'd
when
stayed
you
longer.
came back, you joined the Royal College of Music.
Yeah, with
At
a
the-
Russian professor there.
Yeah,
Big
but so
professor,
you were obviously a rising star, 9-year-old, 10-year-old entering the Royal College of Music. Were there very many younger people?
There
amongst-
were a few, you know, I had a few, there were a few Koreans in the same...
Hong Hwa Chung or anybody famous?
Not Kyung Hwa Chung, but nobody famous.
Yeah, all right, well, Koreans,
But that doesn't mean anything.
they're all bun this, bang that. But anyway, so how many years did you spend in the Royal College of Music?
Well, I sort of flitted in and out because
Yeah.
when I was 12, I started recording classical, first classical repertoire. And so I was kind of in and out. And I had, I had a live-in professor. But I
So
also,
already at 12 you were recording. Obviously somebody was encouraging you to do that.
of course, my mother
Was
found
it?
the
Right.
opportunity.
So suddenly your mother, did she give up her lawyer as her job as a lawyer?
She did. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, she started managing other classical artists and playing a bit more piano.
So
herself.
at 12 you recorded, I think, Tchaikovsky.
Yeah.
Uh,
Beethoven,
one of the
Viola.
youngest people to have recorded Tchaikovsky. And then, so when was the next thing that marked your adolescence?
Probably when I was about 14, I think my mother had gone to a guy to talk about importing mineral water from Iceland or something really sort of random like that. And, and for some reason, he was also a music manager. And she decided to team up with him, and because she thought maybe I needed somebody with more experience than just her, a tiger mum, you know.
All right. So a water salesman from Reykjavik became your manager, and he started managing you at the age of 14.
Yeah.
And already you were selling records, and by that time you were becoming famous. Now, when did you break into something that for which you are well known, the sort of bridging or mixing together the classical and the pop?
So the crossover thing started when I was about 14, 15. It was on that first crossover album called The Violin Player that I started, you know, mixing pop and rock and jazz.
Is that the one with a cover of you emerging from the water with steam coming up?
Yeah, that was
probably
a single.
from the crew rather than than the actual cover itself. And you, I remember, even when I was around, we all went and just bought the record, and then of course we enjoyed the musical recording, but we particularly enjoyed your cover, which we're so slightly embarrassed to put always the second one, you know, so that we don't pretend to have bought it, you know, for the cover. But that record sold a lot of records, the
Yes,
copies.
I think that, you know, it was the first time people had seen, you know, there were a lot of other violinists who popularized the violin, like Nigel Kennedy brought it to the masses with core classical repertoire, but there were other people like Jean-Luc Ponty who were writing their own material, but I guess somebody hadn't really brought it together with a sort of maybe
Did you ever come across Kennedy?
Yes.
Yeah, and has he remained a friend, or do you not see so much of each other?
We bump
now?
into each other every now and then, you know, like recording studios or like
Is he as
award
grumpy
shows.
and
No, he's terribly charming.
Yeah.
And I remember once writing him an apology because a journalist had sort of twisted my words and called him a dirty old man or something. And they put those words in my mouth. And so I just remember my first memory of actually having contact with him was writing a letter to his
I hope you
management.
didn't correct it by saying that you put it in my mouth. But nevertheless, so we're now at 17 or 18,
Yeah.
and you've made some very remarkably successful records. And so that propelled you into performances, correct?
Yeah, sure. I mean, already after that first crossover album, we toured around the world, and it was the first time that I'd really gone on tour with a rock band. But it was really, at that point, it was really about work, and it was.
I know you were very popular. I mean, I remember seeing you first time in Hong Kong. I think you went on the stage. I brought our friend Silas Chow, you remember, and he went mad. A lot of people went mad. And subsequently, I have to confess, I was so seduced by you for the opening of my shop in New York. I got you to play the violin on top of a double-decker bus. Isn't that right? In Manhattan on
Might have been a taxi, but
a taxi,
something
sorry,
similar. Yeah.
Madison Avenue. So what age were you then?
Probably about 17, I think, because
17.
probably that was around the China.
Perhaps I was the dirty old man. But you were absolutely remarkable. You brought Manhattan to a standstill. I can tell you that. I remember it very, very well.
Well, at that stage, it was like an album a year, you know, so it was like a treadmill of recording, promoting, touring, recording.
So how many albums did you produce during the age of 14 or 20
There
odd?
was maybe, I can't remember, maybe 5, I can't
Yeah,
quite, because
okay.
I was keeping up
And they
the
were all very
classical
successful.
along with
Yeah.
the crossover stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And then when I was about 20, my mother and I split in terms of management, and
Yeah.
then I just became a bum.
Yeah, okay. Did you have to wait until you're 21 to get hold of all the money?
Well, what was left of it?
What was left of it?
But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, without my mother, whether she was a tiger mom or whatever, she, you know, without her support and push, you know, I wouldn't have done a quarter of the stuff that
your
I've
mother
done.
is a remarkable woman. I know her very well. Anyway, so now you're on your own. You are 21 and so forth, and you just carry on. And I remember you keep on appearing in performances and so forth. But at that time, did you think of anything else rather than the crossover for which you were best known? I mean, musically speaking, what ambitions did you have in developing your musical sense?
Oh, I wanted to make really uncommercial experimental albums and find myself, all the things that people are worried about, basically. But when you've sort of lived in a hothouse environment and you really want to keep up the schedule of an album a year, every now and then, you know, you
I think you didn't have time to lose your innocence properly when you were young, if that's the right word.
Absolutely, and
I
you're
think
still
you were
growing as
recapturing
an
your
artist.
youth.
You're still growing as an artist. I mean, at that age, most people would still be, okay, maybe they'd be performing at a young age, but they'd still be going to lessons and still going to master classes and developing in that way. But for me, it was just like onto the
All right,
stage.
now we're coming to a plateau a bit of your life where, when was the time when you perhaps decided not to pay so much attention to your musical career? Was there a moment when you said, I want to do something else?
Oh yeah, from basically from the moment I split from my mother professionally, because you know, I think that it was wonderful, and I absolutely at your age wanted to have a vocation, and I felt so excited to know what I was going to do for the rest of my life. But at that point, it was about just playing. It wasn't in my head going to become like a career, a profession, where you have contracts to honor and this and that. And obviously it's good to learn, well, first of all, it's great to have those opportunities, and it's good to learn discipline. But there were a few albums that maybe I wouldn't have done had it been me in charge and a bit more mature.
Do you still perform?
Yes, but not that many shows.
How many performances?
On
do you have?
average, no more than about one a month, on average.
Well, that's quite a lot still. I mean, so for the last 5 years, let's say, you've been performing how many? 60 concerts?
Yeah, maximum, yeah.
Well, when was the last one you played?
December,
Yeah.
but I was in the middle.
Where was that?
That was Russia.
Russia.
Yeah, so I'd been to Russia in February 2014 for a non-musical activity, and then I returned in December for shows.
Well, you obviously are still in huge demand. Now, I don't want to hog the thing because it's already 25 minutes, so I want to encourage the floor to ask questions. So, who would like to ask the first question? Yes.
Hiya.
Can you just use the mic?
Hello, good evening, Vanessa. I represent here from BBC Chinese, so I would like to report this news on BBC Chinese.
Oh, okay.
So my question will represent Chinese readers, actually, because all the Chinese readers know you have a tiger mother.
So, have a tiger mother.
You have
Oh, I have a tiger mother.
your tiger
Sure.
mother. So would you like to give
I
some
should have brought her here on a leash, shouldn't I, or something?
Would you like to give some suggestion to all the Chinese tiger mothers, please?
A suggestion to the mothers. Wow,
Because
I'm
most
not-
of the mothers in China, they are tiger mothers.
Yes.
They are.
They are. They still are.
I know, but don't
Maybe
forget,
including me.
she wasn't a tiger mother at first until you were about...
when it became like a career, then she kind of got obsessed with that. And I remember there was an album called China Girl, and I was dragged to the hairdressers because I had really long hair then, but it was time for an image change so the public don't get bored of you. So I remember I was just like, I was pretty old, and I should have really spoken up for myself, but I just didn't.
I mean, your question is whether you think you would recommend mothers to be tiger mothers.
I would be a tiger mother if I were a mother.
Really?
And that's why I don't want children, because, no, because, I mean, you know, my mother, I've said this a few times, so it's no big secret, but my mother said, I'll love you, and I'm an only child, so she said, I love you because you're my daughter, but you're only special to me, you know, if you play the violin. And, okay, a lot of people consider that cruel, but at the end of the day, you know, you're loved for reasons, because you're nice, or you look good, or you cook well, or you are, you know, somebody who's needed by the other. There's always a reason. And I didn't grow up with this sort of, you know, unconditional love, because I think love is conditional. And maybe that's because I've been programmed that way. But I think you have to be ready to offer something to your parents. And I think that I definitely had to make my mother proud. And she certainly had a lot of potential in music, but she you know, my grandma didn't have the sort of capability to propel her into stardom. So maybe she lived her life vicariously through me, which was hard to take because I'm an only child, so you really get all the attention. But in many ways, that's also, thank God I got the attention because I could be lazy as a kid. And I think that if I hadn't had a kick up the backside from my mother, as I mentioned at the start, I wouldn't have done, you know, a quarter of the things that I did. But at the end of the day, you know, people didn't ask.
It's difficult to tell whether it's a good thing or not.
And I'm not a mother, so I can't give any advice, and I'm totally unqualified. So, you know, whatever you say or whatever you do as a parent is always going to be taken badly in some way, and it's going to come back at you
but let me
years
ask
later.
you this. Would you say, looking back, there were things that you thought you might have been, you might have done or you should have done when you were not forced or when you felt the need to practice?
I wanted to read English or history at university. And I suggested that to my mother because my professor had suggested that I could go there and be good at it. And my mother just thought that was the stupidest idea in the world because she said, you're just so white, you become an impoverished professor. I said, but at that age, you know, you're a romantic when you're a teenager. You don't think about money. And she was just like, but why? Unless, you know, for her, if you don't have talent, power, or money, you're nobody. So that's how I was brought up. And if I had a child, I'd either leave it to its own devices and probably not offer enough support, in which case I'd get 20 years later in my face, why didn't you give me half the energy your own mother gave you in nurturing my talent or whatever my child's talent may be, maybe no talent. But on the one hand, I think sometimes I'd be like my mother, which is to really want to have the kid who's got the A pluses and who has the biggest birthday party and da-da-da-da. So I don't know. I'm not a parent apart from to my chihuahua, and I'm very soft on him.
All right. Another question? Yes, the lady there.
Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. It's very interesting, and I think you look fabulous. Now, just to continue the topic, you talk about that you're definitely somebody now, and then you achieve so much, I mean, huge commercial success at only just 30. Lots of people only a starting point. So you have all the opportunity to become whatever you want, and then what's your plan? What's your next passion in life? Can you share with us?
Well, one of my passions is sports, but sports is something just like music. You have to start at a super young age. So I'd actually, from the age of 14, I didn't have very sort of high ambitions. I wanted to be an impoverished history or English teacher, or I also wanted to be a ski instructor. So when I had more time to just, you know, bum around and enjoy other activities in my life, I decided that I wanted to become a better skier. But obviously at a very, very amateur level, because skiing is something that at age 8 you should already be in ski club, racing. I mean, I think for anything, the younger you start, it's not just music, but sports, anything, you know, the more chance, especially if it's a technical discipline like sports or classical music, you know, you have to put in the hours. And at this stage of my life, I think I've discovered that, you know, I've tried skiing, I've tried singing, but the violin is what I'm best at. And I will be making a new album, and I keep promising fans that, and they're sick of hearing that. But I've had, you know, the last 6 months of quite stressful period of my life because I got banned from skiing. I went to, from professional racing. I basically went...
You have appealed, and,
yes,
and
absolutely.
nothing has happened yet.
Yeah, but I mean, just to give you a bit of background, I went to Sochi, the last Winter Olympics, for Thailand, for my natural father.
The first time that Thailand had a skiing Olympiad, just like that film on the, well, not film, but the Jamaicans, right? On the
bobsleigh team, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the first Thai skier.
But it was a super stressful time because I went without a trainer, so I was like the only athlete there without a trainer. I don't think it would have improved my margin that much. I mean, maybe 20 seconds behind or 15 seconds behind with or without a trainer. But I had a super time. But then I got banned from skiing by the governing federation. So the last 6 months I've just been, locked down, appealing that. So if you had asked me 6 months ago, I'd say, oh, on the side, carry on skiing, ski racing. But right now it's unfortunately just making you
Well, I'm sure that we look forward greatly to the day when your appeal is successful and then you become another skier, which would be remarkable, turning from violinist to a skiing Olympiad.
Just to finish the question, I do go on, so do cut me short. But basically, I also really wanted to get more into charity work. So on the 1st of June, I don't know if you've heard of an organization called Cruelty Free. It's against cosmetic testing on animals. And, I'm going to be working with them as a global ambassador to really push it worldwide to stop testing on animals. So for
in
me,
order for cosmetics manufacturing.
for cosmetics to start with, and
So
then
what lipstick are
phasing
you
out.
wearing?
Apparently it's non-tested on. Lena will know. She went and did a whole shop of non-animal tested lipsticks. Although at the shoot I had my dog and he was covered in my
I don't think
lipstick,
at
so
that
it was
color
tested
you
on
need to
him.
test it. I can assure you that people will spot you from a mile.
But yeah, for me, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff for me. I've been an only child. Everything's been about, me. And I think every now and then, I was kind of really massaged for a career in music where a lot of people just
Do you have any
everything to make you
pets
happy.
if you love animals so much?
Yep, I do. I
What
had
do
a
you have?
Shar-Pei before, and I have a Chihuahua now. And
Are they bitches?
he enjoys humping my boyfriend at night,
All right,
so
okay.
in that sense.
All right.
But so I just, everybody gets that.
All right, so violinist, skier, animal lover. So we might go on, discover more labels. Anybody else has got a question? Yes, let's have a man asking a woman.
Hello, Vanessa.
Hiya.
Possibly you remember me. I met you at Olympics, Sochi.
Oh, okay,
I
cool.
greet you at the ceremony.
Okay, great.
Just a
She
bit
does not remember.
Obviously, no. Yeah, I saw your performance at Sochi, and it was great, to be honest. I mean,
Thank
as
you.
being someone who was not originally trained as being a skier and then competing to others international Olympians, I mean, you were so brave, I wish to say.
Thank you.
My question is, I mean, like, well, you just mentioned about you being banned, and I know that you got the passions about being a skier. Would you still be carrying on your career into skiing, or whether you will just stop like that?
Well, it's very flattering to call it a career, but I think that depending on the results of my appeal, then for sure I will be thinking about the next one. But it wasn't about going to the Olympics for me. It was just because as a kid, my parents had to put in dates in the diary, a recording, a concert for me to understand what I was working towards. So it was just a mental date in my diary that by a certain date, I wanted to have improved by a certain amount. And so if I do that under the radar, so not going for the Olympics the next time, but just doing it for myself. I mean, I did a ski camp a few weeks ago in Val d'Isère, just before the resort shut. And I did that just for myself, gait training, just for myself, because it's a passion that I have. But, people, I think if you have the chance and you have the time, you should always have a hobby that it means something to you, because your job is your vocation, it's your life, family's first, but there must be something that you let off steam.
Are you a skiing fan? You obviously went all the way to Russia. So why did you go? Oh, I see, a volunteer.
Okay.
All right, well done. All right. Okay, well, you come and volunteer yourself here for nothing. But I was going to ask you, I mean, when you told me you were skiing this and skiing that, I said, don't you have insurance over your fingers? I mean, I just
do,
can't
and
bear the thought of you breaking a thumb or something.
Well, it was the
Isn't
one thing that
dangerous?
I never said I wasn't a rebellious child. I mean, maybe on the outside, going from classical to rock. But personally at home, I was very, very, obedient. But the one thing I wouldn't give up, because I gave up horse riding, I used to horse ride every day after school, but that was, deemed too dangerous if you were, a developing musician, especially in central London. But skiing was one thing I would never give up. So that was,
You come near to any injury?
I've broken my elbow, and I was super excited
God.
about that
Oh,
because,
really?
yeah, because I'd never broken anything. I was like kind of like treated like a porcelain.
Not even your heart?
No. I was treated like a, a typical only child, porcelain doll and everything.
The
And
right or your...
my left, so it's not
Right.
so bad because the violin just stays there really. So
Did your
once
mother
you've got
freak
it-
out?
She actually didn't give a toss because we had actually split at that point in time. In fact, she was super happy
sure.
about my band, I heard.
I'm sure she didn't say that. Whenever I saw your mother, she always asked after you. There
She
was
asked
sort of-
after me via you.
No. She always had a bit of emotion in her eyes. So I can tell that the maternal instinct was very, very much evident in evidence. Right, another question. Yes, man with a beard.
I think it was 2005.
Yeah.
Hi, I think it was 2005. You did a tremendous concert at the Royal Albert Hall that we went to.
Thank you.
And ever since then, we've said we'll keep an eye open for another concert. And we've watched your websites, and you're performing in just about every other country. But when are you going to be performing in the UK again?
Yeah, I'm so bad. I will perform if you promise to come to the next show, and all of you guys will promise to come. I will definitely perform, because you're right. It was, nearly 10 years now since my
Are
last
you
show.
adverse to traveling? Well, why didn't you go to wherever she is performing? I've gone to the end of godforsaken place in Korea last month in order to follow one of my heroes, a Turkish pianist. So I think you should get out Thomas
Just so
Cook's
I get
brochure.
a feeling, what were your favorite songs, or are your favorite songs of mine? Oh, you can't remember any of them? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And play on the, Yeah, I have very talented musicians on stage, and I'm really lucky because, it's one thing to be a soloist and to be groomed as a soloist, but you need all those people, and they have great solos and licks during the show. Okay.
Well, you've got a remarkable memory. I hope you're not a stalker. Anyway, you've got a 10-year loyal fan here, and he's begging you to come back to play in London. Okay, well, she will do that, and keep on looking at her website. Yes, question.
Hi,
Hiya.
I'm really glad to meet you, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Are you a musician?
No, I'm currently a student, studies international political economy in King's College London. But I started playing violin when I was 9, and now I still play it.
Okay.
But just not like you professional, because I was not stopped, when I say, oh, I can go to the music school for my college. My father say, oh, you don't have so much talent in it. So
How would he know?
I
mean, well,
He heard you.
yeah, no. Actually, I went to a competition
okay.
in my city.
Yeah.
They invite the professional come from the Beijing, and I get the lower mark from that profession compared to other.
But there's no right and wrong in music, and sometimes if
Yeah.
you don't conform, they give
Yeah.
you a bad grade. But that's what's fun about music, is that
Yeah.
it's something about pushing the boundaries, and I think that somebody shouldn't ever put you down. I mean, obviously, it sounds like you have a great future ahead of you.
I was
anyway.
a little bit obsessed because I want to do I have just heard of music treatment for people who have psychology problem. I want to go that direction. But now I study political economy, but I still love it. Yeah. But my question is that how important is music and violin in your life? I mean, when I play violin, sometimes I feel like it's like my boyfriend. And sometimes I feel like it's just like me, because many people like to describe violin like a woman, beautiful
right.
woman. I don't know about it. So what's your feeling about it, and how important is the violin to you?
Well, I've played my actual violin since I was 10, but for me, the violin symbolized a sort of a voice for me, you know? I mean, I'm actually really shy, so with, I know nobody believes it, but when I'm actually with a violin, it feels like I can go places, I can dream things that I can't actually do in real life, and I think that, you know, my partner's a winemaker, but he said to me the other day, you know, music has got to be the best job in the world. And that's from a winemaker who can drink wine every day. And he still has, you know, great respect for music. And I don't know, it's been a part of my life for so long. And when I was around four, I took up the violin. And when I was 8, when I was asked, do I want to take it seriously? You know, I led with my heart, which is I loved the violin, but also I thought, well, half my life I've already invested, this is when I was 8, I thought this way, in playing and getting to know the violin. I'm not going to give up on it now. So, you know, I've always wanted to know what more music can bring me, and I never had an idea that I could bring pleasure to other people from our music, but when you hear that people have, you know, made love to your music or proposed to your music, and you know, they're still looking forward to a show 10 years later, that is just an amazing feeling. And I think it's my way of kind of communicating, because I'm not really somebody who's terribly social. And I think the most social I get and the most lost I get is in music. And, you know, it keeps you young, it keeps you dreaming, it keeps you hopeful. So I think music signifies the rest of your life every time. You know, you pick up a violin, it's like, life has started again, I think.
Do you mostly play the electric or amplified
No,
violin?
I hardly play the electric, a few songs only on
So
stage.
you still practice on a standard violin?
Yeah.
Is it a Stradivarius?
It's a Guadagnini made in
Well,
1761.
that's good, yeah.
Yeah.
And all I remember is Tommy Cooper used to say that his father left him a Stradivarius and a Rembrandt. The only trouble was that Rembrandt was not a very good violin maker, and Stradivarius was a very bad painter. All right. Yes, Harry. Sorry, 1 minute. Yes.
Okay.
No more.
Okay.
You've had your bit. Yes. Go back and feel beautiful playing the violin. Harry, yes.
My name is Raymond Lee, and may I ask a potentially stupid question, maybe? Yeah.
Well, I will tell you that.
Okay. How would you describe the key of your success so far? It is down to, say, talent, or hard work, a good teacher, or luck, or even Tiger Mom?
Wow, I'm going to give a really boring answer, but I think it's a mix of everything, you know.
Nature, nurture.
Yeah,
That's essentially your
nature
question.
versus nurture. And I think I've always struggled a little bit, because violin playing gives you joy even in the privacy of your own four walls. And the same for me. You know, when I've tackled a passage alone in my own place, I get the same amount of pleasure as when there's a full house. So you do it for yourself. But of course, for it to become a career, you have to have good luck, thick skin. That's why, for me, I didn't really formulate why I called it musical chairs. But musical chairs there's always one less space. And, you know, there's only there's only so many opportunities in the world, and some of us get them and some of us don't. And that's why I'm loath to go on about my mother being a tiger mom, because so many people would kill for the opportunities I had. And it's so easy to just not be thankful for what you've had. And I would say there is definitely nurture, because as we've discussed, especially with something like classical music, you do have to do a certain amount of learning. It's not all nature and all creative inspiration. There's the nitty-gritty of just being able to pick up and play. Music lessons don't come cheap, anywhere. Then the nature part, I guess the fact that my mother played music, don't know, is it true that you play music to kids when they're in your womb? I mean, all that must have seeped into my subconscious. And I think, you know, when people say they're tone deaf, I really don't believe that, because I think we all have a certain amount of potential in us musically. We just have to draw it out. And then in terms of luck, you know, it is about luck. If you want to go into it commercially, it must be about luck. And, you know, in the day that I started, okay, there wasn't social media, so nowadays it's easy to get your music out there without having a recording contract and all of that. But definitely the fact that I had a manager and a mother who knew a little bit about, you know, music and law and all of that combined, you know, it's a combination of stuff. And you look at one kind of artist, and then you see, you know, a wave of similar artists. I've always been happy to be like a bit of a trailblazer, even if it means I get all the flack from the critics. I would rather do my own thing rather than be formulaic about my career, copying somebody else or even copying what I do, which is sometimes also the reason why I think sometimes I'm a bit tentative about a new album, because, you know, the more albums you do, you know, you struggle more and more about where do I want to go, you know, with the future. So anyway, I sort of rambled
Well, it's
on.
interesting you say that sometimes you might have acquired your DNA or the nature bit through your mother, you know, in your womb. There is a extraordinary novel, I don't know whether you know, it's called Spring Sonata, and it's by a woman author called Bernice Rubens. And she was pregnant, and she was carrying this child in her womb. And every time she sat down to play the piano part of Beethoven's Spring Sonata, the fetus in her womb started playing the violin part. It's an extraordinary story, and I strongly recommend you to go and get it. And of course, the Spring Sonata, as we all know, is one of the most beautiful melodies. It might even be the melody of all time for me if I had to force and torture to choose one. But go and read it. It's called Spring Sonata, and I won't tell you the ending, but the child magically plays it every time she sits down to play the piano part. Sorry, and somebody else, yes.
Hi, I was just wondering
Hold on. I know you're a butch, but calm down. Yeah.
Okay.
6 inches away from your mouth.
Okay, I was just wondering whether you had any favorite composition of from the albums, the contemporary classical albums that you've done, whether there was a favorite one that you had, and on your flip side of a coin, whether there was any which you didn't particularly actually like playing.
Yeah, cool. I think my favorite song of mine is called Solace. It's on an album called Subject to Change. And for me, that's just, I mean, I have like a mantra, like, which is peaceful nothingness. And that's how I want to feel, and that's how I want to go. And when one day when I'm no longer, for me, that's like paradise, is to actually be an inanimate object. It's always been my dream. I know that sounds bizarre, but, and for me, Solace sums that up for me. I feel just, yeah. I've been an only child, you know, obviously being in hotel rooms while everybody was so much older at the time. You know, now my band and crew tend to be younger than me, but you know, at the beginning, you end up with a lot of your own company and enjoying it. And so Solace best sums up, I think, the way I am and my mood and what I'm looking for. My least enjoyable song is probably the Four Seasons. Okay, I didn't have a hand in writing it, but it was just, you know, at the time, EMI had such big success with Nigel, and they kept pushing me to record this, like straight off the back of him, and I was like, but let that be Nigel's signature, and I don't really feel that I want to record that, but I think I waited a few years, and finally I succumbed, but I just thought it was so kind of obvious to do, you know? I mean, as a composition, it's amazing, but you don't need one more version from me.
Who plays it faster?
Probably me.
Quite right. Were you going to ask a question?
I didn't finish his
sorry.
question. Yeah, well, it was a little bit, No, yeah, Storm, I enjoy Storm. And probably, yeah, it was never pure, nothing that pure with me. It's with a little bit of an arrangement twist in it. I just think we didn't need another one from me. No.
All right. I think you were going to, yeah.
So the question I was going to ask you is, when you think about being in a position of privilege and a lot of luck that led to where you are, how do you see trying to shift that to give more people a chance? And I think one of the things you always wonder is there something that's changing in the next generation to give more success probability to people from various backgrounds? Like, what have you seen evolving in classical music or just in music in general? And how has that been changing in the last sort of couple of decades?
Yeah, I'm terrible at social media, so you know my website has hardly been updated. But I think the great thing about the modern world and social media is that you can get in touch with others so much more easily. And that provides opportunity because, you know, in the old day, it used to be word of mouth, you know, and then you had to buy big adverts to get seen and your album heard. And nowadays, it's like one click and it's out there for the world. And the world is your judge. And if it's good or if it's something that, you know, strikes a chord with others, then it will be a success. But, you know, what is a success? As I said to you, I enjoy tackling a passage in my own room. Doesn't mean that it has to be like millions and millions of albums sold. So, you know, I think as long as you are grateful for what you've achieved that day, that is all I'm aiming for, really. I think that it's really social media that's definitely helped that. In terms of allowing more kids, I don't know, I haven't really looked into this, and James would know more about this than me, who had the lunchtime recital here at 1. But if all schools could make music, and I think sport already is, up till a certain age, compulsory, I think, like that lady said, it's the best medicine in the world, no? And I think that it really helps you mentally, it helps you with discipline, it gives you your own private sanctuary, and I think that it's important that, you know, that's the thing about music, is that you are not, of course the opportunities are there, but if you are rancid on stage and you just don't, you know, touch anybody at all, then you'll never be, you know, considered by anybody. So I think it's important to just make it compulsory. Obviously, there are going to be fathers like that lady who just don't want to encourage their kids to play, but we can't police every family, but we can definitely make it compulsory. And I think nowadays you can put out a ditty, a little riff that you've just created, and if it catches on, probably some guy's going to copy it and then make a big hit out of it. But that's the risk of social media, but at least you get in touch with the people out there, and I think that's amazing.
Musician? Not as much.
That doesn't mean anything, not as much. You're a musician if you just enjoy music. You know, in many ways, my partner, I think in many ways, intuitively, he may be more musical than me sometimes, you know? That's why I say musical chairs, you can teach somebody to play,
Last night
you know.
we had Susie Digby, who is a great choral conductor and passionate about wanting to make musical education compulsory. And in a way, you know, she had some arguments, and perhaps she might be right. Okay, we've got about 5 more minutes. Yes, you too. Older man first, younger man later.
Vanessa, how are your relations with Beijing? Have you played at many big concerts there? And I would imagine with better promotion, you would go down a stall. And one question for you, Sir David, if I may. Have you ever considered conducting a TV program in a format similar to this, one-to-one? You obviously know a lot of interesting people, and I believe you know even more higher profile people who would be fascinating guests on such a program.
Thank you.
There aren't many Chinese faces on TV. I think you'd be ideal.
All right, well, thank you. I think we better concentrate on the first question. The first question is, do you play in Beijing? Have you played in Beijing? When was the last time? Do you like going back to Beijing to play? That was actually the first place, the first destination abroad that you fell in love with.
It is, yes, it's true. I haven't been there for at least 10 years as well. I think I've been since for TV shows, but they're not quite the same as live shows. So yeah, I mean, life has changed so much in Beijing, and people are so open to different kinds of music. But again, like that part of the world, they're really into their discipline, but more and more they're into letting go and enjoying different kinds of music. But I haven't been for ages, but I would definitely go.
Why don't you move the chair? Because the sun is in your eye, and you've been holding it up. So if you move 1 foot to the right, you'll be in a shade, right? Because you're making me very nervous. I don't want any member of my audience to feel uncomfortable. But thank you for asking me the second question. I'm a mere cockroach in the proceedings, so I think I defer to all the famous stars like Vanessa to come on, and they should be the things that shine. But
I wasn't going to come. I was too shy to come unless I knew David was, leading, and
Yeah,
so
kind.
he would be a fabulous host.
Yeah, well,
Outshine
Vanessa is
his
one of
guests.
my favoriteest girl in the world, so I'm extremely pleased that she has come. I always promise all my guests to come to be relaxed and have a conversation where they do not need to be clamped up, to feel that they might be attacked on questions they don't want to answer. This forum is about people talking about their lives in honesty, because unless you are relaxed, you don't become honest. And this is what we want it to be. We're not trying to catch anybody out. We just want to see and experience and learn how exceptional people achieve what they achieve. I'm fascinated every day by people who achieve extraordinary things. If I had the choice, I'd love to interview those people who drilled through that hole in Hatton Gardens and stolen all those boxes. Ingenious. I'd love to meet them if they identify themselves. Right, the very smart-looking man with a child.
Thank you, Vanessa, for sharing your very sort of personal sort of story about how you kind of came about to your passion. I was just curious, because obviously you've been on the receiving end of teachers in a way of have you actually thought about, or have actually been on the giving side in terms of teaching, and kind of how has it felt, given you've probably gone through this pretty tough times? And
I owe everything to my teachers, and I had a live-in professor as well. He's currently the concert master of the Royal Opera House, a guy called Vasco Vassilev. And when he took me on, he was 19, and I was 10. And you have to have a very generous spirit to be a teacher. I don't think I'd make a good teacher.
Sorry, your child is not going to get Vanessa Mae as the teacher.
But I think it's a calling in life. It's a vocation, and
you don't think you enjoy it.
If I could be that generous in spirit, I definitely would. To impart that, the whole, what is it called, pedagogy. Thank you. It's fascinating to me because I don't understand it, and to have Vasco, who was such a wonderful violinist, but to see me, not half as good as violinist as he was, get the opportunities that he didn't, for him to be a soloist, but then take on a job as, the concert master, you have to have a huge heart for that. And he was also my mother's boyfriend, so it's a bit complicated, but, we also don't have any relationship. But now, because they remain great friends. Anyway, without digressing, he was very, very generous, and even my teachers at school, so academic school, they weren't sort of like specialists, like hardcore music teachers, but when it was time to pass me on to the next teacher, they would do the research, they would say to my parents, we don't want to hog her for us, We want to find the next teachers to pass her on to. I find that amazing. For me, they're like nurses, you know, and some of us have that and some of us don't. And don't.
Those who do,
that was honest, wasn't it?
those who don't teach. Right, perhaps the last question. I mean, we'll put you one if that's a quick one.
Yeah.
Because time is up. Go on.
Hi, Vanessa. Quick question. Who do you look up to in the music industry, and like who really inspires you?
I got an opportunity to work once with Prince, and that guy just oozes talent. And you know, he was amazed that I could read music. Wow, as I said, you can teach a chair to read music. But you know, the guy, he came to the studio. There was nobody there. It was Minneapolis. It was just like 2 engineers and me and him. And he came, but with a jacket like that, slashed the navel with full body glitter, with platforms. And it was just because it was part of the performance. You know, I go to studio in slacks, in like grubby shoes, because I'm just like, well, I'm not on show. I can just concentrate on the music. But for him, the whole thing is the show, whether people are watching or not. And I remember because we were only recording, so I only packed like really, really, you know, kind of casual clothes. And he refused to go. He said, okay, we're going out to a club now, but you can't go like that. I said, why not? He said, because I'm not going out like that with you. And I said, well, that's how I go out in London, so it's fine for Minneapolis. He was like, no. So he got into a grump and we didn't go out. But the guy, you know, he just oozes it, and you're just like, wow, if that guy, if he's so desperate to read music, fine, but it wouldn't have made him more of a genius. It might have actually constricted him, because, you know, when something is too taught, I think sometimes you have to, you know, bring it from within, and you have to want it, and maybe if your parents didn't encourage you so much, then you work harder for it. I don't know, but he was the guy that I thought, that guy was born to make music, and if he wasn't alive, you know, the world would be a sadder place. And okay, he can make hits, but I don't think he wants to. I mean, he makes album upon album, but you know, you think it's all this creativity, he wouldn't be worried about the small things, but you know, he would make sure that an engineer walking across the room wasn't pirating the tapes, so he would get them random, spot check, to make sure. And you know, for me, my most exciting moment of a show is to basically listen to the 90-minute show after. I enjoy dissecting the show, and I enjoy finding if I could have bettered this or the mistakes and that. And I think there's something in us that, even if you've had privileges and you've had people put it on a platter, you know, here's a courier, take it or leave it, or others who've really had to fight for it, you have to have a slightly kind of neurotic, obsessive element to it, and that's also what I loved about the violin, was that, you know, your whole life is focused on millimeters. You know, you can feel when you take it to the luthier if they've overshaved by millimeters, and I enjoy, you know, that sort of molecular life where you phase everything out and you're just zoned in, and your life is just like a strip of wood. I don't know, you didn't ask me about me and my violin, but I just, okay, sorry.
But other than Prince, I mean, let me ask you about the hypothetical question. If tomorrow I said, or your manager said, you have a chance to collaborate with David Bowie, or Barbra Streisand, or Madonna, or Elton John, who would you choose? Choose.
In order of preference?
Yes.
Okay, well, I would want to work with all of them, of course, but probably David Bowie, I guess.
David Bowie, I think
followed
so,
by,
yes.
Who was the third?
Barbra Streisand.
Madonna. The Elton John, Madonna, and Barbra Streisand.
All right, very last question. We're running out of time, but I like, because you have had your hand up for a while, very quickly, yes? Right, quickly ask a question. We are already 4 minutes overdrawn.
Yeah, going back to the previous question, the conversation, thank you for addressing the teachers as having generous spirit.
You have already asked the question,
No,
right?
no, I am a piano teacher.
The same, I know, but it's not the same.
I'm a piano teacher and musicianship teacher, so it's nice to hear how you come across with a musical journey and how how you made it to a professional life. So what would you say to young musicians, young learners who may or may not decide to take up music as their career, but obviously they're keen. But it involves hours of hard work, tedious practice. What would you say to them? They're young, and also what would you say to their parents?
Okay, I think that hours and hours of practice is actually, my mother used to say, God, the day when you grow up, you're going to miss when all you had to do was play the violin. And actually, you live in a bubble, right? If you're a skier, everything's set up for you. All you have to do is train and deliver. And as a musician, all you have to do, especially if you're young and you're not taking care of other parts of your life, is all you have to do is practice and live in this bubble world of making music. And when you look back on it, you realize that to have that chance is crazy. And I think that, to have a job that, it's not really a job, it's what other people do as a hobby at the weekend, is get the guitar out of the cupboard and strum on it. That is your job. I mean, there's nothing to complain about. So any students that you have who you want to shake because they have promise, but they're lazy, you can't have a perfect child or a perfect student. Some have a lot of, discipline, but they're not that talented. Some have a lot of talent, but they're lazy. Okay, it's very rare that you get the mix, the perfect mix, but it's definitely worth putting in the hours because, you get to live in this world and share what you've basically slaved away on. And you owe it to yourself. You owe it to the fact that you have talent. I mean, otherwise you're only letting yourself down. So that's what I'd say to them. And the parents, yeah, of course, as a parent, you feel so responsible. You want them to have a safe job. I guess that's what they think about all the time. But, your job is your life for most people. And, yeah, it's true. You might not make it commercially, but if it fulfills you, is it important to have a successful child or to have a fulfilled child? That's a big question for me, and I guess for a lot of people. And so, you want to give them encouragement, but maybe you should have a sort of deadline in mind and say, okay, if you don't have the opportunities, even if it's completely unfair, it's not your fault, and somebody just got more undressed to get the record deal and you didn't because you have values. But if you have a goal and you say, I haven't got a deal or I haven't made it by this stage, then maybe it's time to have a plan B. But it's always good to have a plan B. But I think you owe it to yourself and to your talent and to your kid and to your student to tell them to try for something. And how many people, I'm not the best, for sure, yeah, we know that, the best violinist in the world, but you have something to give, something to share. And if you make the hair stand up on somebody else's, skin because they get magic from what you play, then isn't that all that matters? So that's what I'd say to them. And don't be afraid of hard work in anything,
Thank you. Before I close, I just want to give the opportunity to that gentleman there who's got the most extraordinary face. The gentleman there in the white shirt, I'm fascinated for the last hour why you're here, who you are. Would you like to ask a question? You've got the most beautiful face I've ever seen.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
are you related to Gandhi?
I would not like to get shot.
Very good answer.
Thank you, sir. But thank you for noticing me. Actually, I had a number of questions, but they've all been asked. And my philosophy is that if you wait long enough, somebody will ask the question that you've got in your mind. It's my honor to be here. I'm from Singapore, actually.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I happen to be around. And
fantastic.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as much. I have just one question for Vanessa, if it's still allowed. What are your memories of Singapore? What do you have to say about Singapore?
Oh,
Thank you.
I have great memories of Singapore. I left when I was about 3, but I remember, going to, what do you call it? What is before kindergarten?
Before kindergarten
no,
is Before nursery.
Nursery,
You're absolutely right,
yeah.
nursery.
Nursery, and I remember going to because I started playing the piano already when I was living in Singapore, and I remember going to my, at the end of the, I don't know, month or something, me and my boyfriend, a 3-year-old boyfriend, we, had practiced this piece on the piano or a duet or something. But my mother was actually on a business trip in Japan. So to be fair, at the very beginning, she wasn't a tiger mom. She left me to my own devices. And I remember, delivering that. Maybe it was only my grandma who was there. But I remember playing the piano there. I remember my parents, my original father, biological father, him and my mother splitting up. I remember seeing them crying. I remember the wedding to my second father. I remember so much from Singapore, and I have a great nostalgia for my time in Singapore. And I used to go back once a year, to visit my grandfather who continued living there. My maternal grandma moved to London with us pretty much. But yeah, I have great memories from Singapore, and I know it's changed so much, and I haven't been there for ages, but it's a great place, and I think, okay, there's a lot of, apparently hothouse environment there, but I think...
A lot of boredom there, yeah.
Boredom.
Yeah. Listen, we have transgressed on your hour dramatically by 10% or 20%, but listen, is a testament to how relaxed you have been, and I'm so pleased that you have come, and I have enjoyed your conversation a great deal, and I'm sure that this China Exchange will remember with great affection all the words you have used, and this is what we aim to do, to retain, like a train station really, great reunions, great farewells, all the wonderful words used and the emotions. And I felt tonight that for an hour we have a great deal of affection and emotions, and I think that exuded from you, and I want you all to join me very warmly in thanking Vanessa, making a very rare appearance and talking about her life, her fascinating life, her brilliant life, which will remain, I'm sure, a constellation in years to come. So please, thank you very much for coming.